listening to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
You're listening to the NASP Podcast. This specialty pharmacy podcast is a collaboration with the National Association of Specialty Pharmacy and the Pharmacy Podcast Network. The mission of the National Association of Specialty Pharmacy is to improve specialty pharmacy practice by promoting continuing professional education and certification of specialty pharmacists while advocating for public policies that ensure patient access to specialty medications. As the healthcare industry's leading podcast dedicated to the pharmacy profession, the Pharmacy Podcast Network is proud to bring our listeners the NASP Podcast, in collaboration with the National Association of Specialty Pharmacy.
Hello, my name is Sheila Arquette, and I am the President and CEO of the National Association of Specialty Pharmacy. I am delighted to welcome a very special guest, Tim McLeroy, to this episode of the NASP Podcast. Tim is the Executive Director of Marketing and Patient Services at Noble. Tim has a wide breadth of pharmaceutical experience spanning the past 27 years. This includes working in the lab, hospital and pharmaceutical segments, marketing and commercial development, as well as multiple combination product launches and patient experience programs related to adherence. Tim, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Sheila. Glad to be here and look forward to our conversation today.
Great. So to get started, as the Executive Director of Patient Services, on a daily basis, you likely encounter multiple stories of patient experiences. Can you tell us a little bit about any challenges that patients are facing when they begin their therapeutic treatment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. One of the things I would just talk about, what we do at Noble. This is I like to call us a patient experience innovation company. And really, a lot of what we do has been born out of listening to the challenges that patients come to us with their problems. Obviously, we work a lot with pharma clients and brands that come to the market, but it's very interesting always to hear about problems or challenges with patients that get overlooked very quickly. Case in point, we were just at a congress last 2 weeks ago, I guess, at Symbia. Yep. And we had a booth there, and we had some of our training devices and things like that. And that's one of the areas we specialize in patient training. But I would have people come by the booth and tell me like, you know what, shots aren't that hard. And it was funny. I love it because I was pushing back, and there was a group of 3 ladies that came by, and one of the ladies was a little flippant. She's like, these devices aren't very difficult to use. And so I said, have any of you guys ever had to self-inject before? And the lady at the other end, she started talking. She goes, yes. She goes, it's funny you say that. She goes, and I go, can you tell me about your experience? And she started having literally a somatic response to the answer. And she was like, you saw her tense up. She got very quiet. She goes, yeah, I had to give myself shots. I got prescribed the medication. She goes, I did not know what to do. And I was at home by myself. She goes, I had to wait till my husband came home. I couldn't do it. And she goes, I would get nervous. I got sick to my stomach. Eventually, after through some progression and her husband giving her multiple shots, she was able to learn to give herself a shot. But it was interesting. I thanked her for her transparency. I said, it's amazing. I said, I thank you for telling me your story. Her doctor had flippantly said, had given her the prescription and said, it's easy to do. And we hear that over and over and over again. And I don't think it's a ding on the doctors, really. There's time constraints in a doctor's office. They have a lot of things we're just talking about. They have a lot of things that they have to do, these checklists to follow. And in essence, auto-injectors have been designed to be, if we were going to say flippantly, simpler to use or easy to use. But you know what? Putting metal in your body is not a default reaction that we're born with. And most of these medicines are expensive, and patients know it, and they don't want to mess it up. And so we hear over and over that, that doctor who's an expert in the molecule, they're expert in the treatment, they're the expert in knowing what is the drug that's going to help this patient move to the level of outcomes where they want to be and live that life they want to live. But when you put it in the hands of a doctor, they're not experts at administration. And that's where we see it over and over and over again, that it's challenging. Listen, and if it were easy, we wouldn't have a business. But at the same time, I think it's really being empathetic to the patient, empathetic to the family that's actually having to start a therapy. There's so much new going on at that moment. It's so easy to overlook the simple use of the device when there's been so many other conversations that have gone on with the doctor and with the nurse and everything else. And on top of that, even if that patient had gotten spectacular training at the doctor's office, what are the odds that they remembered that by the time they hit the parking lot, let alone if they remembered it 2 weeks later when that medicine actually showed up from the specialty pharmacy?
Sure. And I think you bring up, some really some interesting points, from the physician or the healthcare provider perspective. It may be very easy from a technical aspect, right? You're no longer maybe having to reconstitute a vial and draw up a syringe. These auto injectors are great, but that's just the technical, right? And there's more that goes into it. Like you talked about that woman that you spoke with about giving yourself an injection. Right. And there could be a lot of even I would think as a child and maybe you got, immunizations or shots from your doctor and that could have potentially, maybe that stuck with you. Maybe it wasn't the best experience. And then when you're doing it to yourself, you're right. Like we're not accustomed to putting metal into our own body.
Well, so I just had flashbacks of I have a twin sister, and when we would go to the doctor's office and get shots, right? I would hold my breath and not say a word, and my sister would scream. She would literally walking in the room. The doctor hasn't even touched her, and in fact, our pediatrician got to where he would not give the shots because he didn't want her to associate a negative experience with him, and he wanted, as a doctor, wanted it to be a positive experience, so he couldn't give her a shot. But she would start literally screaming just even at the thought of having a needle. And, it's the same thing. I think this is one of those, people get, when we talk about these emotive things and feelings, I'm talking about feelings today, but listen, there are real barriers to actually getting your treatment. And, I've seen patients that literally in some human factor study, we say count to 10. But, it's amazing. Their count to 10 is so much faster because they want to get it done quicker, and they're still not getting full injection, right? It's something that needs to be considered. It's not for, it doesn't mean that everybody has the same reaction, but these emotive barriers and challenges and understanding are real barriers to that treatment. And too, I was just talking with someone yesterday, we're talking about it, and I know listen, I've been in pharma. I know all the legal, regulatory, all the things, but let's be honest. A lot of the ways things are written are not patient friendly. I won't mention the product, but it's there's a lot of biologics that's very similar for use. On the first page, there's literally 18 uses of the phrase "do not," and it's like "do not this, do not that," and I'm like, when do you get to what the patient the patient just wants to say, just tell me what I'm supposed to do, right? Exactly. But each one of those, it's all of a sudden I'm thinking I'm not a psychologist, but that's making me tense. Don't mess this thing up. So, it's stuff that we have to consider. And I think this is where, Sheila, we came to you and started this interaction with NASP, why don't we meet the patients where the patients are starting to receive that therapy? It's not cutting out the doctor. It's not mitigating responsibility. But I think it's important. It's the right information in the right way at the right time from the right person or the right group of people.
Absolutely. And Tim, appreciating, as we both do, that healthcare providers oftentimes are being pulled in a million different directions and maybe just don't have either the time or the resources to provide patients, right, with that in-depth training and to address all of the other issues beyond the actual, technicalities around auto and, either injecting or using an auto injector. What is the solution to this problem? Or are there any other resources that either the providers or the patients or both can turn to?
Yeah, unfortunately, right now that resource is YouTube, right? And that is where a lot of this information is going, to the point where I was saying materials and stuff are, well, one thing we see, and a majority of people don't want to read. Some do, but I'm just saying we have to think about the ways we all receive information in different ways, or there's things that we gravitate towards. But YouTube has been, and I don't know about TikTok because I'm not on TikTok, but YouTube is where a lot of folks go to figure out how to give themselves a shot, and then that's kind of a toss up whether it's being done right or it's being done wrong. My medical side of me says you still want someone who knows what they're doing and has at least maybe some type of degree behind their name. But there are resources, and that's one of the things that we've provided that we give back to pharma, but we're also seeing actually the benefits of going through a specialty pharmacy channel is these trainers and videos. And these trainers, we talk about demonstration devices, however you want to talk about. Noble, they're the high fidelity. I still believe, take out technology, Wi-Fi, and everything else. It is nice to have something tangible in your hand to practice with, and make your mistakes, make your understanding, get used to feeling and touching and using a trainer, add on to it some simplified IFUs and then a video, and if you can combine those in a way, which is some things that we do for our customers, and we're actually doing a pilot right now and looking at it, simplified instructions for use, simplified video, being delivered through specialty pharmacy at that time when they're receiving their treatment. We see it's making a difference, right? Like I said, it's a combination of what and how, so it's like, is that information in a way that a patient can receive it, but then at the right time.
Right. So, Tim, in 2023, right, we have finally started to see the long-awaited biosimilar boom, right, start in the marketplace. So how has this impacted the patient experience?
Well, I think it's something, it's interesting. I think it's a watch out for sure. I mean, obviously, part of the patient experience is how do I pay for this? And so hopefully the advent of more biosimilars is going to be a little easier on the wallet, though for the most part, we know in reality that doesn't affect the patient so much. It's affecting their insurance. But their insurance and their payer may move them to a biosimilar simply for the fact, depending, on their formulary, that you could literally be getting Humira, the regular Humira, one day, and next month you're getting, a different version, right, from a different company. Says I think there's going to be 7 or 8 that hit sometime this in 2023. I think Amjevita is already on, but the rest are going to start hitting in June or July. Mm-hmm. What does it look like? And this is it's funny. I was sitting down with the VP of operations at a specialty pharmacy here in Orlando, and I pulled up a slide that I had, and I showed him oh, here's the 8 biosimilars that are coming to market this year. And literally, he's like, do they all have different devices? And I'm like, absolutely. And he goes, and he just literally, you could see him tense up. He goes, that's going to be a problem. And I'm like, I said, it's something that you need to be aware of for sure. I said, because we were just talking about, the flippant, don't be flippant when you say, oh, it's easy to use. Well, each one of these devices are different. They operate differently. There's a term that's used in human factors world called negative transfer. You may have gotten past your needle phobia or challenges of using that device, but you get a different device put in your hand, you'll react differently to it, or you may make a mistake. And what we find is a lot of times patients will say, oh my goodness, it had to be the device, because I know how to give injections now. And now there's, they blame it on a manufacturing issue because they don't want to admit they made a mistake, right? And they may say, I know how to give shots. I don't need to read. And, so it is something that's going to be a watch out. So I would just even say, how are these clinical pharmacists that are going to receive those phone calls? Are they equipped? Do they understand the differences, the nuances and the devices? And I kind of think that probably not. If doctors don't understand the different devices, how are we expecting other folks that have not been trained? So that's even something we're looking at. Is it something that, I say it's a watch out in the pharmacy world for the ones that are receiving those phone calls? Do you understand the nuances and the difference of the devices?
Right. So I mean, what I'm hearing from you is that given that the patients have experience with a previous, therapy and auto injector, that doesn't necessarily make this transition easier for them, right? Actually could be even a little bit more confusing.
Yeah, it can. And there was a case study out of Iceland. It's one of the things, looking at some of the European communities that have adapted biosimilars sooner than the US, but literally it was an overnight change from Humira to, I think it was Imraldi, which if you were looking at it from an engineering perspective, the device that's used for Imraldi is a better,
right,
air quotes, a better device than what's used for Humira. And they literally had a single page leaflet, and then people were receiving their medication. And they're talking about complaint rates, they all said like they had nearly 80% of the patients had some issue, complaint, or challenge around the device because what they received, the information that they received was not enough. And it wasn't thought out enough to give trainers or, call back to the physicians. So it wound up being a case study and kind of not how to do it. But it's one of those things, this is where I would say we're working with some of these biosimilars, but it's one of those things. I think from the pharmacist point of view, you almost need to be proactive and bait those patients into questions and making sure at least have a better awareness of what's going on. And this may be making sure there's a video for them to watch. Is there a trainer available in this new biosimilar? We actually, I know that there's a lot because we're making a lot for them, but it's something to be mindful of because that negative patient experience suddenly, that's going to interrupt treatment, right? That's going to interrupt these patients that you would like to think that this anti-TNF, the Humira, the adalimumab is working for them. And you wouldn't want to fall into a relapse or, come out of the remission that they might be in.
Sure. So now let's turn our focus to chatting a little bit about telehealth and technology, right? They really, in the past, 5 to 10 years, started to permeate the specialty pharmacy industry and were only accelerated, right? The use and the importance during COVID. So how do you see technology playing a role in creating better patient training and onboarding experience within the specialty pharmacy industry?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time. I think we, it's more than just we have an app for that, right? I think I do like the ideas, and we're starting to see. I think we're remote patient monitoring or remote therapeutic monitoring. That's an interesting area. I think there was always a lot of pushback in the day from physicians didn't want to have real-time data coming to them or a customer feedback or patient feedback that they thought like, I don't want to have, if I didn't answer that text or I didn't answer that dashboard question, then now am I held legally liable? I think a lot of those things kind of fell away with COVID and with telemedicine. I do believe actually there's some opportunities to actually look at how can you maybe, we'll borrow the phrase of remote patient monitoring or something like that. Look at technology that would validate maybe that a patient that has been trained and understands. Those are some things that we have some technology that we're looking at developing and are looking at in place, and that would actually integrate into specialty pharmacy apps that shows that if a patient actually used the device correctly, did they hold it on the skin long enough? Did they pull it away too soon? I look at a day potentially, this is me saying, looking in the future, it's not there yet, but I don't think it's a stretch to say that, let's say a payer is paying for this $50,000 medication a year, and the price tag that's going to be on it, that they would want some type of validation to say that this patient is able to give themselves a proper injection. I see the day where that, somehow through maybe a remote app or a remote integrated within a specialty pharmacy system, that patient receives a kit, receives a device that is able to be plugged into or responds to the app from the specialty pharmacy, and then validates that either they can correctly do the medication or give themselves a shot with a trainer, or it validates it too, maybe that they watched a video And then maybe it's like the third part would be they have to call and, say that, the final part of that certification may be actually talking to a live person. But the technology is there to do it. There's some direction that we're working on to make that happen. But to me, it would make sense if I was a payer that I would like to, at least if there was some type of assurance to know that the one I'm paying for this medication, $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 a year, that they're certifiable or verifiable, that there's a confidence in that patient taking that treatment. So I think it's not a leap. It's already there, right? If we're seeing blood pressure monitors and getting monitored, being taken and sent back to your SPs and the pharmacists there, I think it's going to be a simple thing. It may be, I feel like in the next maybe just a couple of years that we're going to be able to do that, if not sooner.
Awesome. So now let's turn our attention a little bit to Noble. And so Noble is an extremely supportive and actively engaged corporate member of NASP, and we couldn't be more thrilled. And I think what makes NASP unique is that we represent all of the specialty pharmacy industry stakeholders and really try to highlight how they come together to put, as I like to say, the special in specialty pharmacy. So let's just talk a little bit about Noble, right? And how you help to support specialty pharmacy patients. Is there a more cost-effective approach for patient training and onboarding than what's currently being implemented by most pharmaceutical manufacturers?
Yeah, and this is why we're here. I mean, this is why we reached out to NASP last year. This is why we were at Symbia. And I'll go back to it almost, you would say, out of the misery came the mission, right? It puts the knot in my stomach that a lot of times pharma customers would come to us, a brand specifically, and this is where Noble is changing the way we do business and thinking about doing business. That it really, if we're going to be honest about patient onboarding and training and treatment, it's not just the training and onboarding, it's the full treatment. We need to be talking to we need to bring different people to the table, right? Because listen, better onboarding, treatment, adherence, all the buzzwords that everybody loves to have, it requires a group effort, right? I believe it's us looking at what is the win-win-win-win for everybody. So even out of that, as we've worked with our pharma customers over the last several years, they would come to us for an onboarding strategy or tactic, device, video, whatever. We would build it and then give it back to them, and then we would go on to the next project. Whoever knocking at our door, we're not going to do that anymore. In fact, we were online with a customer yesterday, and I'm like, I almost feel like before we give it back, tell me how you're getting it to the patient, and how are you making sure that this is going to be delivered to the patient in a timely manner? Because we're in the old days, talking about my old pharma days, being a sales rep and things like that. Sales reps, had all access to all the doctors. You could get in, do everything you needed to. You could talk to them about training. You could talk to them about your product, all these different things. Well, those days are done. There's still elements of it. But we saw COVID. Suddenly, a lot of people weren't going into the doctor live. We got the telemedicine and all that. The other side is not every doctor wants to see a rep. Not every doctor wants to be influenced or talked to. So we're in the past, like pharma, the sales reps are bringing these materials, this collateral to give to the patient. It's not happening, or for a majority, the high prescribers are not doing that. We also know patients are not going online and looking up your pharma company, the brand name products. That's not their go-to. So this is where, my brain kind of went, I was like, listen, who delivers that expensive, who delivers these biologics, who delivers these injectable, medicines 100% of the time and is having an engagement with the patient? It's a specialty pharmacy. And so this is where we're coming in, at least introducing ourselves. And I feel like this is where we belong. We were at Symbia. I feel like this is where we belong in this space, because the offering we have isn't just a benefit to pharma, but it's a benefit to the specialty pharmacies as well. And we need to be we need to be a part of those conversations when market access is talking to specialty pharmacies, when we're talking about services contracts, different things. We need to start looking at how is this affecting your business? I had a talk with a group at Symbia, and this is like, the simple aha moments. I was talking with a clinical nurse, and she started telling me about the challenges that they have to, for sending out a patient or sending out a nurse to train patients, right? If a patient calls up and needs a site visit, they have regional nurses that they're contracted with, which is fantastic. I love it. But it's costing them $300 when that nurse walks in the door. They have to contract it. I think it's $140 an hour, minimum 2 hours, plus travel and expenses. So once that nurse walks in the door, if it's not being reimbursed by that pharma company, that specialty pharmacy is eating that cost. Well, not that it's not important, that patient, obviously they're willing to pay $300 to get that patient in a place where they're comfortable giving themselves a medication. But what if that could be mitigated earlier? What if that could happen, a quick conversation, a kit goes out, we're talking about that certification, certify that patient that they know how to do it. I guarantee you can be doing it for a lot less than sending out a nurse for $300, right? And then you start realizing other benefits. You're reducing a cost on interventions, but then you're getting the benefits of adherence and compliance on the back end, right? So it's a win-win on both sides for specialty pharmacy, back to pharma, good for them, good for the doctor because the patient's getting good outcomes, better for the patient because that drug is now has an opportunity to work with them, give them a better quality of life, good for Noble because we're now involved in making sure the things that we are creating are getting to the end user, the patients that we care about. So, it's going to take a group effort. It's us talking to new people. It's introducing ourselves to new people. It's showing the value. I'm not myopic. I know there's more than just onboarding and treatment, but it's an important part. So let's not overlook those challenges, those we talked about earlier, emotive barriers, informational barriers, way you learn barriers that can truly affect the way a patient takes a medicine.
Absolutely.
I get fired up about it.
I know you do, and I love it. So what I'm hearing from you is that your approach is scalable for the specialty pharmacy industry.
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, absolutely. We're starting small, but the more I look at it, I mean, listen, we're right where we need to be. Listen, it's like every experience has moved us to this point, right? I wish we would have started here sooner. Well, we're right. We learned, right? We've adapted. But are you going to tell me it doesn't matter who's, whichever specialty pharmacy, whoever, but it's whoever is taking one of these medications or is taking a drug through some type of auto injector or pre-filled syringe. It's that patient is the same, whoever they're getting it delivered from. It's not a ding, but how can we help increase that quality of care? And I feel like Noble doesn't need to get the credit. I just want to make sure that the specialty pharmacy across the board is equipped, is aware that there's different things available that they may not have known about because we've not called on specialty pharmacy. And then how do we build these alliances? I called it strategic alliances and what we need to do. And I think you talked about this before too, Sheila. It's bringing a lot of different people to the table with the same end goal in mind, right? It's how do we build a better experience for those patients? And it's really working for the win-win-win-win, right? And I think it's possible, and it's not a stretch. Tell me what's the downside of a patient getting onboarded properly on their treatment? Where's the negative in that, right? Right. Help me understand where that's a bad thing from business, and tell me where that's a challenge. Where is it good for your patient experience and NPS scores? I don't think it's a bad thing. It's actually we're starting to see a positive effect and tie some ROI to that experience. Like I said, it's new conversations with new people, and we're ready to talk to anybody. And if not, we're going to be preaching our gospel to everybody that'll listen. We keep showing up to these meetings, and hopefully somebody will want to talk to us as well.
Well, absolutely. And with all the, the reimbursement pressure on specialty pharmacy right now, and the fact that they're forced to do more with less, this is another amazing tool, right, in their toolbox to help with that patient onboarding and that engagement. And, specialty pharmacy serving as the extension of the the prescriber's office and wanting, we love that the fact that patients can be treated in the comfort of their own home, but oftentimes they feel a little bit, I think on their own island, right? And so now that this is just another resource that, hey, yes, I can do this and I have somewhere to go if I have questions. And, my specialty pharmacy team has connected me with this tool and this resource that I can use. And, I don't know about you, Tim, but sometimes I've done something 100 times and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I forgot how to do that, right? I might need a refresh.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I was just thinking that made me think we're talking about when I was at Asembia, I listened to a couple of went to some of the things. And what is the kind of the buzzword now? It used to be triple aim, right? But now it's talking about these value-based care, right? I think this fits right into value-based care where we're bringing different stakeholders to the table to realize a benefit, a less cost to the system, but a greater all benefit to everybody that's involved. But it just means us, looking at even value-based contracts. How do we look at it? Rebates might be going away. There's challenges with the Inflation Reduction Act. We have to look at those things. But I think we're at a good place. It's kind of is in its infancy, starting out this value-based care. But I think that's really the approach that we have to have. All of us have to have eyes and look at it differently and maybe get out of our little tunnel vision on some of this stuff. But there's a benefit for everybody. So.
Tim, thank you so much for chatting with me and sharing this valuable information. I'm sure you would agree it truly takes a village to support a specialty pharmacy patient journey. And we cannot thank Noble enough for your support of NASP, but more importantly, right, for specialty pharmacy and specialty pharmacy patients.
Well, thank you. This has been great. And I like that. I'm looking, we're early into our relationship, but it's been great. And really, if there's anybody has a question, let me know. And let's explore these opportunities because we're going to bring other people to the table. But we feel like specialty pharmacy, I'm not overblowing it, but overstating it. But I think they hold the key into our a main pivot point and a key player in really giving that care to the patient in a better way than they've had before. So we're just happy to serve you guys and glad to be a part.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And as a reminder to folks listening, NASP corporate members are invited to be my guest on one complimentary podcast each year. For more information on this or other NASP membership benefits and events, please feel free to reach out to us at info@naspnet.org or visit our website, www.naspnet.org. Until next time, hope you have a great day.